in counties in the U.S. where marijuana has been legalized, the overuse of opiates for pain has decreased substantially.
That's awesome.
And the crime rates have gone down, interesting. Well, people stoned on pot? Like,
dude, it's hard to pick somebody's pocket.
Go break into a building? I don't think so. You're just not going to get it together.
You might knock for a long time. I think you might knock at the front door. I don't think you're going to break in.
And you're not going to, you might, that's right, you might knock. You're not going to go out, what are you going to go out in the alley and have a fight? No, you're not.
A real slow fight.
That's right. Well, while you're watching your hands, like,
so it's like chess with your hands.
Exactly. That's not going to happen. So, who knows? Like, I mean, if we had to make a bad drug legal, the worst choice was alcohol. Alcohol also makes people aggressive. It's the only drug we know that actually makes people aggressive. So you see a massive effect on crime rates because half the people who murder someone are drunk.
Oh, yeah.
And half the people who are murdered are drunk. And, and you're most likely to be murdered by a family member. Yeah. So I've been joking with my audiences is like, well, if you really want to get killed, the best thing to do is go drink with a family member. So, which is actually statistically true, which is terribly comical. Crazy. It's like, go get drunk with your family if you want to die. Well, people have an unspecified potential for development, educationally, obviously, with regards to the skills they have, but also in relationship to their character. And it's much more encouraging for people, I think, to concentrate on who they could be rather than who they are, especially when they're young, because they still have most of their life ahead of them and they're not everything they could be yet. And so to tell people even something like, well, you should feel good about yourself the way you are, it's like, well, that there's something there that's seriously lacking because there's so much more that you could be, that you need to be, and that you should be aiming at. The problem with being okay the way you are is that you don't have a goal then. And people need to have a goal in order to come to terms with their life. People need a purpose in their life, because life is difficult. Life is suffering, according to our great religious traditions. And that's an essential truth. And in order to cope with that suffering properly, you have to have a noble purpose in your life. And if you associate the pursuit of that noble purpose with fortification of the oppressive patriarchy, then you take the legs out from underneath people who are trying to make their way in the world.
I wanted to go about, the part of this pay gap that is related to an unfair prejudice against women. You concede that part of it may well be.
Well, it may be.
Yeah. So if somebody...
I don't think the evidence for that is strong, actually. Okay. If you do the controls, you actually find that in many situations now, especially for young single people, women have a wage advantage, not a disadvantage. My sense is that the primary burden for childcare for infants, well, during pregnancy, obviously, but for the year after and maybe the year and a half after is going to fall disproportionately on women because it's easier for women to take care of infants than it is for men to take care of infants.
Breastfeeding is a factor.
That's actually a factor. Indeed. And breastfeeding actually turns out to be extraordinarily important for children's development. You show the women pictures of men engaged in typical domestic activities like vacuuming or doing the dishes, or you show them engaged in typical masculine activities, say like mowing the lawn or fixing something outside. The women reliably rate the men who are doing male typical behaviors as more sexually attractive. Here's an interesting issue that's never talked about with regards to gender equality. So, and this is a very well documented fact. If you look across societies, women mate across and up socioeconomic status hierarchies. So a woman will date and marry someone who makes the same amount of money for her or more. All right. So, and that's true regardless of the egalitarian nature of the society. It holds true in Scandinavia as well, because you might say, well, that's because of women's lower socioeconomic position, but you can equate for that and you don't get rid of the phenomena. So one of the things that's driving the aggregation of wealth into fewer and fewer hands is the proclivity of well-off women only to marry men who are as well off as they are or greater. Men will marry across and down socioeconomic status hierarchies. So if we're going to enforce equality, does that mean that we don't allow women to marry men who are richer than them? This bill will be interpreted in light of the policies generated by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, very large set of policies. Now, the Ontario Human Rights Commission is a radically leftist organization. I think it's the most dangerous organization in Canada, although you could debate that. And they set out all sorts of policies about how this this legislation was going to be interpreted, and the federal government linked to their website to state that Bill C-16 would be interpreted in light of those guidelines. So I went and read all the policies. Well, one of the policies was that if you didn't use the preferred pronouns of a given group, that you could be charged essentially with a hate crime. I was interviewed by a New York Times journalist last week, and she said she took a literature degree at Columbia. And she wasn't very happy about that, by the way. She thought it was an expensive waste of time, interestingly enough. A very bright girl. And she said that she didn't even know until after she graduated that there was any way of reading literature except through a postmodern lens. And the postmodern lens basically is, well, the intent of the author is irrelevant. All that really matters is that you take the literary work and you deconstruct it to find out which power hierarchy its author is essentially supporting and which one he's or she is excluding. It's like, well, that's all there is to literature. It's like, well, that isn't all there is to literature. It's an appalling way of treating art. It's an appalling way of treating the political landscape as well. The Deloitte models posit that climate impacts could affect global economic output and offer the following figures that unchecked climate change will cost us. $178 trillion over the next 50 years. That's $25,000 per person, to put it in human terms. Who dares deny such facts, stated so mathematically, so precisely, so scientifically? Let's update Mark Twain's famous dictum. There are lies, damned lies, statistics, and computer models. Computer model does not mean data. And even data does not mean fact or real world. Computer model means at best hypotheses posing as mathematical fact. No real scientist ever says, follow the science. Yet this is exactly what bodies such as the EU consistently pronounce, pushing for collectivist solutions that often and inevitably do more harm than good. Ask yourself, are these Deloitte models, which are supposed to guide all the important decisions we make about the economic security and opportunity of families and the structures of our civil societies, accurate enough even to give those who employ them any edge whatsoever, say, in predicting the performance of a stock portfolio, one based on green energy, say, over the upcoming years? The answer is no. The global economy, let alone the environment, is simply too complex to model. It is for this reason, fundamentally, that we have and require a free market system. The free market is the best model of the environment we can generate. Let me repeat that with a codicil. Not only is the free market the best model of the environment we can generate, it is and will remain the best model that can, in principle, ever be generated.